Hello, everyone, and welcome to another bonus episode of the Stephen King podcast. This time it is bonus episode number 8, and I am talking with writer Tosca Lee. Hi, Tosca. Am I saying your first name right, by the way? I forgot to ask you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, and Tosca is a New York Times bestselling author, and she's currently working on her second novel in the House of Bathory duology, Firstborn, which is an anticipated sequel to the first novel, the Progeny. And the Progeny is out on trade paperback right now, and it's through Simon Schuster, and I assume it's available through all the normal outlets.
Yes, absolutely.
All righty. So before we get into your current work, though, I'd like to set the table for our listeners and find out a little bit about yourself and tell us where you're from and how you got to where you are now.
Okay, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
I'm talking with you today. It's just south of you in Nebraska, and I'm originally from Virginia. That's where I was born. But I've done a lot of living out here in Nebraska, which is where I am now. And the writing thing, I wrote pretty much all my early life. I just never really thought of it as a thing, though, because I had my heart set on becoming a ballerina. That was the thing.
Right.
I was very serious about ballet all the way up into my teenage years, and I used to dance with the Omaha Ballet, and I would spend my summers away dancing in different places. And when I was 14, I got an injury. I tore a groin, which is just a gross injury because you can hear it tear. You know, when you something, it's just disgusting. But that really set me back for a while, and I kind of got to the point where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to bounce back all the way from this, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to be as competitive as I need to be. So it was off to college for me. And I had been all my early school years, like winning contests for writing and stuff. I used to win young authors contests, and I published my first thing when I was in 3rd grade. And but I never, still really thought of it as a thing until I came home from spring break my freshman year. I went to school in Massachusetts. I went to Smith College.
Okay.
So I was back in Nebraska during spring break and chatting with my dad. And I was talking about how a great book is like a roller coaster, and how maybe it's not got a lot of plot twists and turns per se, depending on the book, but it may be an emotional roller coaster. And I was talking about some of my favorite books, and I just blurted out and said, I think I'd like to write a book, because my thought was maybe I could make a roller coaster like that for somebody else to enjoy.
Right.
My dad was so cool. And my dad is a university professor, and yeah. And so he said, I'll make you a deal. I will pay you what you would have made this summer working as a bank teller. And that's what I was going to be doing. And I was a terrible bank teller. If you will spend the summer writing full time like a job and write your first novel.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No brainer, because I really hated working at the bank, and I'm not good with numbers and all that. So I wrote my first novel that summer. And the funny thing is, I sat down to do it. And of course, I had to pick this super hard, like Neolithic historical novel about the Stonehenge people and blah, blah, blah. So I had all this research to organize and didn't know how to go about novel writing. And I sat down and I was like, wow, this is really hard. I had no clue what I was doing. And I was like, oh, crap, where do I begin? But I wrote it. And the next summer, I actually sent it off to Writer's House, which is where it's a group of literary agents. And it's a very prestigious group of literary agents. And I got soundly rejected. I saw the letter the other day. I found it, and they had written back and said, even after reading the 23-page synopsis, never write a 23-page synopsis, but I made every mistake in the world.
Right.
We are still not sure what this book is about. They said my characters were two-dimensional and the plot lacked tension and all this, but they said that the story was reminiscent of Clan of the Cave Bear, which was one of my favorite books.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And so all I took away from that rejection letter was my book was like Clan of the Cave Bear. I was totally doing this again. And so that's kind of how it started. And I kept writing, and it was oh gosh, it was over 15 years later before I finally got my first book published.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So you're one of those 15-year-long overnight success stories.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. So I just go back a little bit there. So you're writing this first novel, you were going to school at the same time, and you're taking, what were you taking at school at the time? Was it English or?
I ended up majoring in English, but I was thinking, for some reason, I was thinking maybe I'd go into advertising.
Right.
I don't know why, or, maybe something to do with trying to become a news anchor. Somebody suggested that to me, and I was like, okay, sure.
All right.
It was like, no, I really want to try to do this writing thing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So then you started to focus on English courses.
Yeah, I did. And when I graduated, I actually took a job writing for a computer magazine.
Oh, okay.
So that was my first job. It didn't pay that well, but it was really good experience because I learned about the publishing process. I became a better writer. I also went to computer books during that time, so I really learned more about the book publishing process through that as well.
Okay. Which has changed quite a bit since then, but still good knowledge to have. So you mentioned one book, Clan of the Cave Bear. So I'm wondering what other novels, writers, were you a voracious reader as well during your life?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. I remember one of my favorite early books was a book called Lord Valentine's Castle.
Oh, yes.
And then there was Richard Adams, who's best known for Watership Down, wrote this called Maya, which I don't think he was very well known for because it was drastically different. It was a fantasy novel and it was very adult. And I thought it was fabulous. I also loved The Mists of Avalon, which is one of my all-time books. Yeah. And that's a big fat tome. I mean, that's like 800 pages, I think.
Right.
But and Anne Rice, of course, Anne Rice.
All right. I have to ask, because it's the name of the podcast, any Stephen King in there at all? Or
yes, there's some Stephen King in there too. And, I might be one of those weird outliers, but my favorite Stephen King novel is Needful Things.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Love the premise. I just think it's cool. Maine is one of my favorite states to travel to, and I've actually driven by and kind of stalked his house before.
Oh, that's good to hear.
I buy it. I don't know if he's still living in the same house. I assume he probably is, but he's got these cool gates, these iron gates. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He's still there in the summer. In the winter, he's moved to Florida because he said he's old and it's the law. So, so you've got a broad range of reading done as well. And then you tried this one book. It was rejected. This book ever see the light of day? Was this your first published novel?
It's in my basement with the rest of the skeletons. And
oh, okay.
There it will remain because it is bad.
Okay. So between that first attempt at a novel and was your first book Iscariot, your first book that you got published?
My first book was Demon. It was called Demon, a memoir.
Okay.
A novel. So that was the first published novel.
Okay. So what happened between those two books that got you to the point that you became publishable?
Well, I worked on another novel for about 9 years, and I call it The Book That Will Kill Me. And I never finished it. wrote on it and rewrote on it for 9 years. And I did a lot of online gaming and stuff, and we did a lot of writing for that, actually.
Right.
I learned a lot about characterization doing that, which is kind of an odd way to learn that, but I did. And then I got this idea to tell the story of a fallen angel's story from his point of view, and wrote this story. I interrupted the novel That Will Kill Me, took a break from that, wrote this story about the fallen angel in about 6 weeks, and suddenly had this finished thing. So I thought, well, I'll try to publish this one.
Right.
And it took 6 years. So
well, you have perseverance. I'll say that.
I guess I just don't know when to quit, I guess.
Yeah. I'm curious, were you doing short stories or anything at all during this time? Or did you have any luck with that? Or was that? I was
writing scenes and short stories and snippets like that for my gaming characters, but which a lot of the people that I used to game with online, we all did. But that was really, it probably amounted to quite a lot of writing, but I wasn't publishing any short stories or anything. I did do some kind of nonfiction freelance stuff, but it was mostly boring stuff.
Okay. So you've got this demon, a memoir, and it was the fallen angel. Was it Lucifer or was it somebody else? Or
No, it's just a random fallen angel. His name's
okay.
Lucian. Yeah, Lucian. He was a low-ranking guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get that published? Like you said, it took you 6 years.
Yeah.
Was that just finding a publisher, or were they just asking for revisions? Or
a lot of people didn't like the format, and I wasn't quite sure because I did it in. I think it was technically like second person.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And it's a little different that way. And
yeah.
I don't know that the format wasn't quite working. And I did acquire an agent during that time, but I was just getting rejected across the board. And finally, there was an editor who was like, I love this story, but can you frame it up differently?
All right.
And so basically rewrite the whole thing. And I was like, yes, absolutely. I will do whatever it takes. So I did. I rewrote the whole thing. I set it in Boston. It was either Boston or Nebraska. And my sister lives in Boston. So I thought that might be sexier. I don't know. But, and then I sold it in a 3-book deal. And yeah.
Okay.
So that was an exciting time.
Right, I bet. And
yes.
the 3-book deal, was it for 3 separate books, or was this supposed to be like a series? Or
yeah, it was 3 separate books. And so,
okay.
Yeah, the next one ended up being the story of Eve, which
okay.
Based off of it, I just had one random page of something I had scribbled, about Eve getting ready to tell her story as an old woman in first person. And so when I sold Demon and they said, great, what else do you have? It's like, well, crap, let me look. So, and I found this one page and I took it out and I said, well, I have this. And they said, great. And we'll take one other one too. And I said, well, I don't have any more ideas for a 3rd book. And they said, you'll come up with something. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes.
And I'm seeing here then that you did a series of books, Forbidden, the Books of Mortals, and it looks like you ponied up with another writer.
Yep. So that was Ted Decker, and he's the author he has quite a few novels. He's the author of House and the Circle series, among the others. So we decided to do a kind of dystopian series, and it's called The Books of Mortals. And so it's Forbidden, and then Mortal, and Sovereign. And yeah, that was fun.
And how did you find that? We're sharing a world with somebody else.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who co-author and do it very successfully. And I feel like it was a very successful partnership, and I really enjoyed it. The advice I always give other writers when they ask about co-authoring is you've got to know what strengths you're bringing to the table.
Okay.
That's something we were very aware of because he's always been known as a strong plotter, and I've always been known for my prose. So we knew we were bringing those two things together, but we had very different writing styles at the time. And, of course, writing styles also evolve and change and morph. So it took us a lot longer to write that first book than it did the 3rd book. So
okay. So, and how did this project come about? Did the editor, somebody suggest it to you, or did you meet Ted Decker somewhere and said, hey, we should do a series together? Or
well, it came about because I ended up switching publishers, and through that process, the rights to Demon got resold to a different publisher, which means they were now going to re-release it with their imprint on the spine and with all new cover and all that stuff. And so I had this unique opportunity, which you don't usually get with your first novel, to go seek new endorsement blurbs for the cover and stuff. So, and it's hard to get a bunch of really good ones sometimes when you're first starting out. You don't know a lot of people, your circle's not that huge. And so Ted and I were in a writing group, an online group. And so I reached out to him and asked him to give me a blurb. And he said, what are you working on? And I didn't know that his team had brought my name up as a potential co-author, but apparently they had. And then I happened to reach out. And so that conversation started very quickly.
Oh, okay. That's very cool. So as a partnership, it went well for the two of you. And what did you learn from working with him?
Like I said, he's really good at plotting. And so I really took note of how he does that. And I think it's been very helpful to me in my evolution as a writer. And he was several years farther down in his career than I was. And so just learning more about the industry and through our chats and stuff was extremely helpful.
Okay, very cool. So just before we get into your latest stuff, I just want to take a step back now and ask you about your writing process. You mentioned you have a writing group. Are you a plotter or a pantser? I have a feeling you're a pantser, but maybe a reformed pantser?
Yeah, that's pretty much almost exactly on the nose. So the group that we're in was actually, it's a group of authors that share market ideas or market information or just kind of help promote each other and things like that. So I haven't really had the benefit of being in a writing group, though I do recommend it, especially when people are starting out. So about the plotting and pantsing, yeah, I have been kind of a pantser, and I do try to do a loose plot, but by that I mean a series of events that happen, and then I go into the book and try to plot and figure it out as I go. And that's a fine way to write. And I have friends that write that way or are complete pantsers, like don't even do an outline of any sort.
Right.
For me, I find that when I do that, I end up rewriting a lot more.
Right.
So, and the writing can take a little longer. And when you're doing this as a career, you don't always have the luxury of time to do gigantic overhauls of your whole manuscript. And so it can become very costly time-wise. So yeah, I actually pantsed my last novel. So you mentioned the Progeny, and then Firstborn is the sequel to that. And I've got a new, and Firstborn is out now.
Okay.
I have a new thriller coming out in January that I pantsed, and I did end up rewriting that a couple times. And I'm happy with where it's at now. But for the sequel to that one that's coming out in January, I have taken a much more plot-heavy approach.
Okay, so just to be clear now, you have two series going at the same time?
Yeah, well, the Firstborn, the Progeny and Firstborn is just a duology, so it's done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I've got this new book called The Line Between that's coming out in January, and it has a sequel too. And I don't know if there will be a third book to that or not. I'm kind of thinking this is just a duology as well.
Okay, that's interesting that you're writing duologies, because trilogies are the big...
I know, yeah.
Yeah. You merged a bit of a different drummer. I get that feeling.
And I've done a trilogy. Ted and I did a trilogy together, but
right.
When you do trilogies, you lose readers from book to book. The readership drops off as with each successive book. So maybe that's the reason I kind of like just the two. I don't know.
Okay. So why don't we talk a little bit about Progeny and Firstborn? Why don't you give some context to those two books, and then we can talk about the pandemic series.
Love to. I was at a book signing, I think, for one of the Books Immortals, that one of our fans came up to me and said, "Why don't you do a book about Elizabeth Bathory?" And I had heard of her, but I had to go look and see who that was. And actually, she's a fascinating character. She is sometimes called the female Dracula. And she's a real historical woman who lived in the late 1500s, who is rumored to have been the most prolific female serial killer of all time. And she's rumored to have killed like over 600 young girls or something like that. And then, of course, according to Hollywood, she bathed in the blood of virgins. Beautiful, and she's the female Dracula and blah, 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 all this stuff. So anyway, She's fascinating. I had by then done several historical novels. I did one on Judas Iscariot and one on the Queen of Sheba. And I was kind of ready to do something contemporary and get back to doing a thriller. So The Progeny is the story of a young woman named Audra Ellison. And she has elected at the beginning of the book to erase the last 2 years of her memory and start over. And she doesn't know why. And a little later on, after somebody comes and warns her and she goes on the run, she learns that she's one of the descendants of Elizabeth Bathory, and that her kind not only have some interesting powers, but that they're being systematically hunted and have been for 400 years. So that's the story. That's the beginning, the premise of The Progeny. And Firstborn picks up exactly where The Progeny left off. and continues the adventure. And the fun thing about these books is they start off in the North Woods of Maine, not too far from the Canadian border. And they eventually move overseas to the old Habsburg Empire area where Elizabeth Bathory lived, into Croatia and Hungary and Vienna and Slovakia. So it's kind of a globe-trotting adventure.
Yes, I noticed looking at the books that they have maps and things like that. Was that something that you wanted put in the book, or did your publisher recommend doing that, or how did that come about?
I think it's helpful because I wanted it because unless you're really familiar with the area, it's kind of to kind of track and see where your characters are moving.
Right.
So those of us who spend so much time in North America are very familiar with this area. But
right.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful.
Right. And was that a plotting device for you as well, to keep track of where your characters were at any given point in the story? Or
no, it's mostly just a reference for the reader.
Okay.
But the cool thing is when I was researching this book that I went to all of these places. So I traveled all over. Yeah. And I took my mom with me. My mom loves to travel. So we had some big adventures.
That made it into the book in some form, maybe? Or
and, that informed where certain scenes would take place. So
right. Yeah. Google Maps can only take you so far. Right?
That's right. And actually, people who read the book can see all the real life locations on one of my Pinterest boards. So
cool.
A real life Progeny, and it's a board with all of the real places.
All right. And that takes us to your pandemic series.
Yes. This has been fun. So this is the one that comes out in January. It's called The Line Between. And it's the story of a young woman named Winter, spelled with a Y. And I named her after my stepdaughter, actually. But yeah, she's just gotten ousted from a doomsday cult and is now out in the real world, which she has been taught all her life is evil. And at this time of her ousting, there's a pandemic starting in the U.S. And so it actually seems like the end of the world that she's been taught to fear her whole life is actually at hand. So, yeah. And
what was the genesis of this story? Was it something in the news, or?
It's weird how stories come together because, you can get a suggestion from one person and things morph and change. But I was in New York at my publishers. I'm published by a division of Simon & Schuster. So I'm in New York at the Simon & Schuster building with my publisher and editor. And we were talking about, what's next after these two Progeny books, Progeny and Firstborn, and trying to decide the next direction. By the way, there's a giant picture of Stephen King there in the kind of upstairs lounge area, right over this couch at Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
So I had this idea about a girl leaving a cult and her story, and I had this idea about an ancient virus coming up out of the melting permafrost, which is actually happening in our world today. There was an anthrax incident with a reindeer that came up out of the permafrost and had anthrax spores in it. There's lots of stuff in there that we don't know what it is. So it was my publisher who said, I want this and this put together. And it was a weird mashup, but it was cool and it really worked. And so there it is.
All right.
Yeah.
And is their first book is out, or the second book's coming out?
Coming out in January. And it's actually available for pre-order right now. So
okay. Yeah. Is there any supernatural elements to this story, or
this is completely real world stuff?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got quite a spectrum of books released. What kind of a writer do you consider yourself? Are you like do you call yourself a thriller writer, or do you call yourself a speculative fiction writer? Or
I probably consider myself mostly a speculative writer, just because even when I do my historicals, there's so much that we don't know, especially with the ancient history that I like to do, that it's all speculation even when you're doing that ancient history. So I think at my heart that's probably who I am, but I really like and enjoy the pacing of thrillers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Curious, what do you like? It says that you like to travel, and you mentioned you do that for your books.
Mhm.
What else do you like to do to relax? Do you have other writers that you read, or do you actually try to? Because I find a lot of writers try to tend to read nonfiction because they don't want to be influenced by what other fiction writers are doing at the time. Do you have that kind of a mindset, or do you just read fiction still anyhow?
No, I love reading fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's harder. The ironic thing is sometimes it's harder to find time to do that these days,
Right.
which is weird. But I always enjoy fiction. I love watching TV and movies.
Okay.
I have 4 stepchildren, so I've got 3 boys still at home. So a lot of my time centers around family things or
Right.
cooking. 3 teenage boys, so cooking.
Right.
I love to try to get time with my husband when we can do that. And
Right.
also something we love to do, of course, to keep
Sure.
them together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but those are probably the main things.
Okay. So with all those activities, what is your daily work schedule like then?
I'm laughing because I'm probably the least disciplined writer on the planet.
Oh, okay.
I know people that have they get up and they've got a routine and they
Yeah.
are going to do this and they're going to write 2,000 words a day and they're going to do the thing. And for me, it doesn't, I'm not good at routines. So for me, I get up and if I've got a book to write, I procrastinate for a long time. Then I kick into panic mode and then I write it kind of in a frenzy. But in between I'm doing edits or different things like that, or I'm doing social media or marketing.
Right.
And I mean, in between books, I don't write very much. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's
All or nothing. I'm not good at multitasking. It's either this or that, just.
right. Right. I just find it fascinating because every time I ask a writer that question, I always get a different answer. So it's just really amazing that how many different angles there are to approach the life of a writer.
Yeah, and I think it has so much to do with your talents, your strengths, and your personality.
Right.
And some people are extremely disciplined and regimented, and I wish I were like that. And the only way I know how to do something, I have no discipline, but I am a very obsessive person. So
Right.
I can begin something and then really lock into it and do nothing else for a while. So I guess that's probably how I
Okay.
get.
That's good.
Well,
I think that's everything I had to ask you. Is there anything that you would like to mention that that hasn't come up during the course of our chat?
I just want to say thank you so much for chatting with writers like me and supporting writers like me, because as you mentioned, the industry is always changing. It's changing so much. There are more books than ever available to readers and more authors than ever. So taking the time to talk with writers like this is such an important thing that you do, and I really truly appreciate it. So
that's very kind of you. And as an aspiring writer, I'm hoping that this will down the road will open doors maybe for myself as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I learn a lot just talking to everyone so far. So it's it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And but I thank you for your kind words.
Oh, absolutely. I so appreciate it. So thank you.
Okay, so I will let you go. People probably won't know this, that we're recording this on Father's Day, so I'm sure.
That's right.
I didn't even think about that until about the day of the interview. Oh, geez, it's Father's Day. I hope I'm not inconveniencing you too much, but it's just kind of one of those things. Anyhow, I want to thank you very much, Tosca, for your time and all the best with your projects and future endeavors.
Thank you so very much.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah. Bye-bye.